Guys, so I am so excited for today's episode because today we are going to be digging into a topic that honestly every practice owner needs to be thinking about right now, and that's recession proofing your practice and making sure that your marketing strategies are actually working for you and not just draining your budget. Joining me today is the amazing Alyssa Keefer. Alyssa is a powerhouse in the dental marketing world who brings both strategic insight and real world experience. Alyssa knows what it takes to grow a practice through smart, targeted marketing and how to avoid the costly mistakes that too many practice owners make when they're either trying to grow or just keep things steady. So, this is going to be a packed episode with lots of takeaways. So, grab your pen, grab your notebook, because you're going to have a lot of notes to take. Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. When we got to chatting about where, the dental market currently is, whether it's operationally or market wise, I think that this was a topic that people are thinking a lot about, but maybe taking action at all. So I'm super excited to kind of dive in and see where we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that this is something that's starting to kind of linger. It's something that we're starting to hear a lot about. And at the end of the day, whether there's an actual recession or not, it's something that's good. It's good for you to be prepared just in case, because if it's not a recession, maybe it's going to be COVID, or maybe you're going to end up like with an injury or something along those lines. It's always a good thing to start thinking about how to recession proof your practice because what it's doing is protecting you just in case those emergencies happen.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of talk about it. It's, starting to really hit those Facebook groups and those social groups and even on Reddit and, on these discords. And you're right, whether it's officially here or not, patients are already behaving like it is, right? They're being more cautious, especially on those high ticket, those big ticket procedures. And then they're also asking questions about affordability. And in the realm where we're all in, right? Both marketing, operations, everyone, we're all feeling the effects of dental insurance, which I hope it's okay to say, but we all know it's a scam, right? That's the hardest thing in our industry is fighting these big giant powerhouses of insurance companies that really are, giving our dentists and our practices and our owners, not even pennies on the dollar anymore.
Yeah, it is really disheartening. It's disheartening to see. And honestly, you're seeing a big effect of it when it comes to the hygiene department and what's
Oh,
happening within the hygiene department, which is a whole nother topic. And there's lots of politics and opinions and things like that. But I do think that a lot of it does boil down to insurance and reimbursement rates. So it affects your practices no matter whether you want it to or not. I mean, you're being affected by it today, even if you don't even realize it.
right. I am working with a couple of practices and some are taking it quite seriously. And then there's others who are just like spending like, we are in the post-COVID era and we're starting to get back to like that normal, past the unprecedented times we've all survived in dentistry. But it's risky no matter what. Like you said, if patient volume starts to drop or others are, panicking and they're slashing their marketing budget completely, which will then leave them, invisible when it comes time to be seen the most.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, Alyssa, what are some things that you're seeing when it comes to recession proofing that practices can do to actually start protecting their practice and preparing just in case a recession or COVID or some sort of emergency
Right.
happens?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number one thing is going to be cut waste, right? And so what does that mean? For a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, I don't need, this social media posting or, I don't need to be putting up billboards or things like that. So really looking at and trying to dig in as much as you can in the numbers. Now with dental marketing software, there are a couple out there, but most of them are so archaic because most of our practice management softwares are just not aligned with tracking that data. So trying to do that on your own may be a little difficult, but I definitely recommend to take a deep look at the channels you're currently marketing on. What are the patients, you're getting from them? How many of the patients are you getting them? What is the return, right? So are you getting patients in the door with that billboard? Sure, possibly, but how are you tracking it? What are the collections like from those patients? Are they quality new patients? So really looking at making the most of your budget and putting that into your highest ROI and highest returning channels is probably the best thing you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are ways that you've seen practices be able to track whether or not their marketing is working or if they're getting an ROI on the billboard or the social media stuff, where the online
Yeah.
stuff? How are they able to actually truly see, is this giving me a return?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it does definitely vary from that smaller single practice to the groups, to the emerging groups and DSOs, right? I work with all of those. And, in most of them, I'm going to be really honest. It all starts with a Google Sheet. I'm sure you're very familiar with those and Excel spreadsheets. And it usually starts there because a lot of the times they're working with marketing partners or agencies who can give them that high level data. But most of the times they're not integrated into their PMS. So they're not getting the full scope of that patient cycle. And it does take some level of partnership with the agency or your marketing team to make sure that not only are you being able to pull the information on, new patients, leads that are coming in, the phone calls that are coming in, call conversion, but it also takes knowing how much treatment was planned, how much was it accepted, what are the collections on that, and being able to tie that all in together. So really just starting, and I know it's like the most basic of basic, and you can find, I'm sure, templates on the internet. My friends and I, we've all got our own versions of them across our own agencies, but definitely starting with just start tracking. That's the biggest thing, right? Most people say, we're getting new patients. That's great. And that absolutely is. But when this time comes of whether we hit a recession or not, or as people are starting to see that the economy is really shifting, you need to know the quality of patient you're getting. It's great if you're getting 20 new patients, but if only 10 of them are coming in when they actually show, and then let's say you're only treatment planning, 5 to 10K on each, if that, but your, treatment acceptance is 30% or below, you're really not making it up in your ROI. You might just be breaking enough clean. And in this economy, you can't afford to just break clean. You've really got to push yourself to try to excel past that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. It does come down to a Google Sheet. It comes down to tracking. It comes down to tracking. How did your patients hear about you? And how do
Yeah.
you know that, right? How do you even get the information to put onto the Google Sheet? You have to get your front office, whoever is answering your phones, to
Yeah.
ask your patients, how did you hear about us? How did you hear about us? How did you hear about us? Make sure that they are asking that, because if you don't know how your patients are finding out about you, you don't know where to cut waste. You don't
Yeah.
know what marketing initiatives are working versus what marketing initiatives are not. And so when it comes to recession proofing your practice, if you don't know what's working and what's not, you might fall into one of two categories. You might say, we're going to cut all of marketing because marketing doesn't work, or you keep all of your marketing and you start looking at cutting team members, right? Or things like
Yeah.
that. So knowing where your money is going, knowing what marketing initiatives are working, boils down to get your front desk to ask the question, how did you hear about us? Get them to track how they're hearing about you. And then I love what you said about not only making sure that you know how these patients are hearing about you, but what is generating a good patient, right? Your ideal patient versus your not ideal patient. If you're a practice that thrives, or if you're a dentist that loves doing emergency treatment and you don't love doing comprehensive full mouth reconstructions, great. Make sure your marketing is bringing those patients in. But if you're a patient that prefers to do full mouth reconstruction or cosmetic work or implants, denture work, if you're a dentist that loves to do that because that's what fires you up,
Right.
make sure it's bringing in those patients. And so
Yeah.
how you do that is you track your case acceptance. Track to see not only what did the new patient bring in, right? Or what marketing brought in that what new
Right.
patient, what treatment was diagnosed, and did they accept the treatment or not? So it goes
Yeah.
so much deeper than just saying, is my marketing working or is my
Yeah.
marketing not? Your marketing can be working, but is it working in a way that you want it to for your practice is also
Yeah.
really big.
That's such a great point. And I have seen many practices, you and I have done this quite a few times and iterations over on how to track that, right? And again, it's as simple as starting with something like a Google form or an Excel sheet that, you keep locked up in some ways, right? And when I say that, I mean, if you have Google Workspace taking, usually you are HIPAA compliant, so you don't have to worry too much about that. With an Excel sheet on a desktop, it's a little different. So you might want to just talk to your IT company about how to best manage that and making sure that that is locked so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. But you can simply just start there by keeping up with when the patient came in, the patient's name, what they were treatment planned for, what they accepted, the different touch points that you have with them, right? Even if you have a treatment coordinator or just a front office person, this can be just, 30 minutes to an hour. They sit down at the end of the day or even at the end of the week just to like go through that and keep up with it so that and you can create that list then. And we'll kind of talk maybe a little more about like reactivation and things like that and making sure we're doing the follow-ups. But just keeping an eye on that and building, your own essential CRM, right? Many of these PMSs we work with, and even many of the softwares we use that are out there, they operate in a lot of ways like a CRM because they allow you to communicate with patients via email and text, and they keep up with the treatment, and they keep up with how much you've treatment planned and how much they've accepted and how often you've talked to them, but they're not necessarily taking all of those notes and things like Mrs. Jones said she would call me in 2 weeks. Well, I'm going to call her at 13 days and things like that. So creating that level of like dental CRM is so important in today's realm because as you guys all know, most patients come in, you're going to treatment plan them. It's usually a 72 to, even as far out as 108 days before they even decide to make that second decision to come back in to say, okay, I want to talk about treatment again, right? Because in that time frame, they've done their research, they've gotten on Google or even Chat GPT nowadays, and they've tried to figure out, is this the right treatment plan for me? What can I afford? They've looked at their finances, they've talked to their friends, their spouses, their partners, etc. And so it takes a long time to make the decision. And so, like you said, one of the most important things outside of tracking your marketing is how is your case acceptance doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. So let's talk a little bit more about ROI. So
Yeah,
digging into ROI, because it's a big piece of what you potentially could cut, right? You
right.
could cut your marketing if you're looking at preparing for a recession.
Mhm.
Besides knowing where your new patients are coming from and knowing what marketing initiatives are working or not, how do you really know what's working? What numbers
Ooh,
are you looking at?
yeah,
Am I looking at a 5-to-1 ratio, 10-to-1 ratio? What am I looking at whenever I'm looking at the actual ROI? Because I feel like this is something we talk about a lot. I feel like a lot of business owners, practice owners, they know I need an ROI. I need an ROI for anything that I'm partnering with. What does a good ROI actually look like versus not? So, how do they
yeah.
know what's working well and what's not, besides the marketing people that they're working with telling them that it's working great?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's super loaded. Things like the word ROI and sales have such like this like dirty feel about them, right? Because it's like, okay, sales, well, we are in that business, and ROI feels like, that loaded like marketing jargon, but it is. It's really what it comes down to. And so, you know, everyone's always shooting for that text, right? That magic number that we've all heard and we've read in the different books. And, it really just, it's really up to you to decide what that ROI looks like. But in my opinion, and to get the best bang for your buck and to cover everything you need to, you're going to be shooting for that 10x to 20x on what you're spending. And so, let's say that you have $3,000 in Google ads a month that you're spending. Now that's a low spend, but you may be a smaller practice. And you're bringing in, let's say 2 to 3 high ticket cases and you're converting one or two of those. And let's say you're converting at 20, 30K. Well, you've hit that mark when you hit that 30K mark, right? But if you're having patients come in and you're only getting, a cleaning and a comprehensive exam and you're treatment planning them for crowns, but they never come in for them, is that high ticket, let's say it costs you $800 per lead. Is that worth it if you're not making it and you're just breaking even? Absolutely not. You definitely should be shooting lower. And from what I see amongst my colleagues in marketing agencies and in other, directors and VPs of marketing and DSOs and groups, we are seeing that people are really shooting for that $150 to $300 mark on, what it costs to bring a lead in the general space. But in specialty, right, in full arch, which, I've been doing the last couple of years, we're seeing upwards of 1,500 to 2K for that lead. But again, when you have a 40 to 60K treatment plan and you have a 75% case acceptance, you're definitely going to be okay with that higher return when it comes to, and the higher cost of what that lead is to bring into you. But the
Yeah.
thing about it is too, is that what I often find is people are often tracking just to get that patient to the chair. But what we really should be tracking is what is that cost per start? So like tracking not just the consults, but tracking actual treatment. And you're going to hear me say that a ton because that's often one of the things that I see is that like gap between whether you're working with a marketing agency or partner or you have a team is connecting those operational lines to your marketing and making sure that you're actively communicating those two numbers really to each other. Great, we brought you 30 new patients, how many of them actually started treatment? That's a really important thing to keep up with.
Absolutely. And that says a lot more about the systems that are happening within your practice and not necessarily the systems that are happening within your marketing. So
Yeah.
if you're getting 30 new patients brought in, that means that marketing worked really well. Marketing is bringing the patients in. Your phone skills are working really well because you got the patient on the schedule. Now, what happened when the patient was there that made them say, I didn't want treatment? And that's a whole nother conversation,
That's
right?
a whole that's a whole nother conversation. You'll need an 8-part series on that one. So
Yes.
go ahead and jot that down, everyone. Danae's going to do an 8-part series. Sorry if I just signed her up for that, but there are so many people I would love to share something like that with. We talk about it, we dabble with it, and it's not often they hear, especially someone like myself, right? I'm what I call like a well-rounded marketer. I understand operations to a T. I've worked in dental practices from the ground up. You'll find a lot of us out there who've, gotten to this point, but I would have to say understanding that is a big part of also just the communication is what does that relationship look like between the person who's doing your marketing, the agency that's doing your marketing, how are you having those conversations to educate them if they don't understand, right? That's the thing I run into a lot when I meet a lot of newer marketers or newer agencies that are popping up. They don't understand. They're like, well, I brought you 30 new patients. And it's like, that's great. You did a good job. But now let's talk about the quality, right? And a lot of that is going to come down to how much did you treatment plan and how many accepted it, right? And now there's no magic formula just yet on that. And, there's probably, I probably have a couple of people out there that say, yeah, no, our software does that. Kudos to you. But I think it still comes with just so much of making sure that you have the right level of communication with the people from operations to marketing, right? And when I say operations, right, that's the entire team on the ground, whether you're a small single practice, you're an emerging group, et cetera. That's the entire team on the ground. That's your front desk people, your treatment coordinators, your front office managers, your back office managers, and your hygienists. That's an important part of this, right? Because they do a big portion in these practices who have, hygiene, they do a big portion of your sales for you. And a ton of that is, just, and this sounds so cheesy, but buttering up those patients to be ready when you, the dentist, walks in to then go over the full treatment plan.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that boils down to your patient experience. It boils down to what are the systems that you have in place to enhance and make sure that your patients are having the best experience. And
Yeah.
that does not always mean making sure that they've got the hot towels and they've got, the massage
Yeah.
chairs.
The paraffin wax. Like I love all that, but
Yes.
you can, I think it might have been our old pal, Scott Cruz, who said, you can't put lipstick on a duck
Yep.
or a goose, one of those things. I don't know. I don't know why you put lipstick on a bird, but I always think of him whenever I say that. And that's exactly what it is, or lipstick on a pig. I don't know what it is. Any animal that you shouldn't put lipstick on. But that's the thing. You see a lot of these practices and they look beautiful. The doctors and the team, they're so well kept and they have, this awesome, amenities menu. And you get in and it's like, well, I had to wait 37 minutes past my appointment time. And then I was alone in the room for a while. And, when I wanted to ask about treatment, my treatment plan, they couldn't really answer all of my questions right away. They had to get back to me. And so I definitely agree with you that patient experience, especially nowadays, right? When there is such a surplus and there's such readily, easily access, access to any dentist they want to go to. And people are traveling, right? That's the thing too. People are traveling farther than ever for the care that they believe that they deserve. And so keeping that in mind, I'm with you, like making sure that those systems and those processes, that sounds so, like strict, but having those things in place. And when you do them, it becomes so natural and easy that it doesn't feel like so structured and things like that. It just happens so naturally to get the patient to the chair and the conversations you're having and, making it easy for the patient to say yes, because that's the biggest thing about dentistry. Any of these, what I would call electives, right, is what people think dentistry is, and it shouldn't be, is that they're looking for a reason for you to give them so that they can say no, because they were already afraid to come. They didn't want to be there. So how do you remove those barriers, whether it's through your patient experience or your marketing, to make it easy for that yes?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important that our listeners know we're digging into this piece of it because when we say you're trying to recession proof and get your breakfast ready, and we start to say cut waste, we don't mean just cut waste. We mean
Yeah.
what is waste, what's working, what's not
Yeah.
working. And so if you're looking at your marketing and you say, you know what, my marketing's not working. It's not, I'm getting 30 new patients in, but we're not actually converting that to treatment. That doesn't mean that your marketing's not necessarily working. It might mean your marketing's working really well, but maybe there's some more things that you need to do to hone in on your patient experience and your patient education so that what marketing is doing actually generates what you're trying to generate. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this, but I think it's important that when Alyssa says, right, or when I say cut waste is a really good way for you to start recession proofing your practice, you need to first know what is waste and you need to first know what's working and what's not working. And so what Alyssa had said as well about what what is a good ROI? Well, it does depend on your practice, right? It depends on if you do meat and potatoes kind of general dentistry, or if your practice thrives off of more advanced dentistry and your implant cases and your cosmetic cases, it could vary. It could look like $150, per patient spend, or it could look like a case acceptance of $2,000 per spend.
Yeah.
It just depends on what's going on in your practice. And so knowing what those numbers look like is also going to help you figure out what is working in marketing, what's not working, and where should you cut your waste. Now, another really big thing that I see a lot of practices do is they start something with marketing and then they give it a month or two and they're like, this isn't working, and they try to cut it. What is your time frame on
Ooh,
what you would suggest somebody wait to make sure, is this marketing working or is it not? When do you
yeah.
typically start to see the ROI?
That's a great question. So, I always love to tell people, that marketing is either the black sheep or that silver bullet with a magic lever, right? We went through this many, many moons ago with our old DSO where they just thought we could turn the lever off. And it was sometimes that easy, but most times you can't just turn off those levers like cutting waste. But when it comes to, there's different things, right? You have SEO, which some people spend a lot of money on and they get great results from that. Most of it leads to organic traffic that then pushes them to, lead generation channels. And that's a whole nother episode we could talk about where branding versus lead gen. But, things like SEO are a longer game, right? They have big rewards, but typically within like 3 to 4 months of a good SEO strategy implemented in place, like you should start seeing your organic, rankings start to climb, new calls coming in around the 4 to 6 month mark. But, often seeing like, I would say a 10 to 20% boost in those organic calls as you start to climb those rankings. In other ways, right? Like with direct mail, you're looking for, almost an immediate once those mailers are dropping, right? You want to see the phone start ringing, but working with many of the, dental specific mailer companies, they'll tell you you can get calls for up to a year. And so that's why it's super important to make sure that you maintain those relationships, that you do continue to ask people how they heard about you, that sort of thing. Because a lot of times people put those on their refrigerator and they'll walk past it every single day. And finally, it's like, oh, I have a wedding coming up. I probably should call about that, right? Things like Google Ads, you can see pretty quickly. So with that, I would say within 15 to 30 days of a good strategy implemented with clear calls to action, compelling, copy with hooks and things that are getting people to say, oh, that's interesting. Or, using things like display ads is really popular right now. So you have that top of funnel. I would say that you would see that very quickly in comparison to other, forms of marketing. And then you have ground marketing where you can see almost immediate results in the day that you are doing the health fair and you're getting those leads and you're getting that information, you're scheduling them. That feels pretty good, right? To like get that like off of your like checklist. You're like, oh, we got something that. So, it does vary based on the channels that you are working with, but definitely with the right team or the right agency, they'll guide you and help you to understand that and not just pull that wool over your eyes and say, oh, it'll be 6 months. Now, definitely that could happen, right? That you could have where they're starting from scratch. They're building you a site. You have no absolute rankings, 1,000%. In today's Google economy and the way that they play the algorithms and how Google My Business is working. And, you have these local service ads now. And so you have so many options for how you can run that. There could be some level of time, but you definitely want to see if there's nothing coming in call wise, you want to be able to hold someone accountable to what is happening, right? So how many ads did you get started? What copy did you write? What content are you creating? Definitely being able to hold someone accountable to that is super important in that too when it comes to those timelines.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it sounds like it really just depends on what, like you said, what channel you're marketing through. Sounds to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like if it is a Google ad or not a Google ad, if it is a social media ad or something that you're throwing out there on Facebook or Instagram or even LinkedIn, right? If you're throwing something
Yep.
out there on those types of pages, you don't want to give it a week. You want to give it 30 days to see, is it starting to generate? Because I feel like in today's world, people feel like, and I see it in practices all the time, in today's world, it's immediate. It's immediate. We need to
Yeah.
start getting somebody. I did this yesterday, so we need to start seeing, you know, phone calls that
Yeah.
are flooding in tomorrow. And that's not always the case. Yes, your social media is going to generate a quicker return, but it's then like an SEO or a pay per click would, right? Those are going to generate more 4 to 6 months. Give it about 4 to 6 months before you start to say, you know what, this isn't working. So I guess my point here is give yourself time. If it's on
Yeah.
social media, don't just decide to pull the plug and pivot your marketing initiative because it didn't work in a week. Give yourself 4 weeks, give yourself 6 weeks to
Yeah.
see, is it actually working? Yes, those platforms are going to generate a quicker return. And then whenever it comes to the bigger, more high dollar marketing, you're looking at 4 to 6 months before you start to think maybe we need to pivot. And so I think that's a really good, important thing, because a lot of practices, I see it all the time. We're not patient. We don't give it the time that
No.
it needs to give.
Yeah.
Or I even see the reverse, where some practices are way too patient and they let something go way too long before they pivot, and they change their verbiage, or they change their content, or they change, the wording that's on the marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Especially with social. So I didn't touch too much on that because it is such a trivial topic nowadays, right? Now, more than ever, the attention span of most of our target market is about 3 seconds. I mean, it used to be, we used to have 7 to 15, it used to be a little bit longer, but it's gotten shorter and shorter with the introduction of these short form videos. And, hats off to TikTok, right? They have managed to figure that out. And Reels is doing the same thing with YouTube Shorts, LinkedIn starting to do it. And so you have such a short amount of time to get that attention span, to get them to actually, and that's why it's so important to really understand, your hooks and the headlines you're using and the copy that you're writing. And you're absolutely right. You can't post a video one day and expect it, even if it goes viral, to generate new patients within 24 hours. You definitely want to keep it consistent. And one of the things that's really becoming more prevalent and, pressing, and what I see and what I'm trying to implement across all of my clients and the practices I work with, is this omni-channel presence, right? Which sounds like a crazy thing, but no, we used to really focus on multi-channel, being on every single channel, which you can still do that. But when you're doing an omnipresence, you're taking maybe 3 to 5 pieces of content, and they're, being sectioned off, and you're having the same message across all of those different channels. So it feels like they're seeing different portions of the same thing, but they're seeing it more often, right? And that rule of seven, that we were taught back, in college about psychology, is that in, the realm of sales, someone has to hear something 7 times before they even decide to make a move. And so when you think about multi-channel, you could be getting different messaging for that same practice, but not necessarily focus on that one thing. So that one person that, is thinking about getting a new smile because they have a wedding coming up, they need an implant, etc. If you take, a piece of content and turn it into 10 different things that you can use on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and then you're also doing your Google display ads all on that one singular topic, using that one singular piece with the same messaging, that omni-channel presence really starts to come out and help people to see that and get through that rule of seven, or however many it might be today in today's, economy. So I just want to touch on that, making sure people understand, because you made a great point about, some people wait too long. And then some people wait, way, and they're like, wait a second, but I've been posting every single day. And that's fantastic. But again, this also comes down to your branding versus lead gen. When it comes to social, 80, 90% of it is going to be your branding. It's building that reputation. It's really helping people, see who you are and who they're going to be meeting. And that helps warm them up, so that you then can retarget them through things like Google ads. Bing ads is popular in a lot of rural areas these days. So making sure that you are doing that. And sometimes it can feel so overwhelming, right? Because you're like, I'm doing all these things, right? And you have these owner dentists, right? The CEOs, these chief everything officers, and they've got the front desk, team posting here and there, but they're like, hey, I also want to be on TikTok, but who's also talking to the marketing agency and this and that. And so it's like trying to navigate all of that can be so overwhelming. And so finding peer groups and, people like you, Denae, and myself, and finding someone who can just give you the advice for free, right? That's the thing. Most of what we have, we can give you for free to start, but really digging in is where you're going to really make that money with us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. We're dropping gold here today. All right. So we talked a lot right now about recession proofing your practice, cutting cost, knowing when to actually pivot, when not to pivot, knowing what a good ROI looks like in your practice. What else, Alyssa, can practices do when it comes to recession proofing their practice?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, when it comes to practice is knowing, are you trying to manage growth mode, or are you trying to stay in that steady, let's just make sure that we get through this bump in the road? And I think a lot of people, they want to grow right before, they want to get as much as they can in case that happens. And that's fine, right? But Again, that's going to first come down to scalable systems in place for not just your marketing, but your entire team, right? Operationally, clinically, really diving in on those systems and processes and making sure that you have also the right people who can make that happen, right? There's nothing worse than getting those scalable systems. You see it and then you have one bad apple and then everything starts to rot, right? So when it comes to marketing though, in that growth phase, you really want to be aggressive with your campaigns on what do you want to fill. So do you want more cosmetic cases? Do you want more implant cases? How are you ramping up your budget at this time to fill the schedule, whether it's Google ads, it's direct mail, social media ads, things like that, right? I always recommend if you're trying to do this is looking at that heavy investment in that top of funnel, right? There's some more marketing jargon for you guys, but that's, that first touch point of how do people find you? So are you doing short videos on social media talking about things like what to expect at your first visit? Here's the things you can expect when we come into your consult. Here are the things that we do in our practice that make us different than any other office, right? We're open late. We open we have Saturdays. You want to do family appointments, we totally got you covered, things like that. Then, looking at Google, right? That's a big one. So what are you doing with Google display ads or even YouTube ads, which can give you a ton of traction as far as views and clicks and things like that. But it's a great way to introduce your practice's philosophy, that, introducing your team or even just the office vibe, right? Because the thing about it is when people are trying to decide it's the right time to go to a dentist, and let's say they've never been to your office, it's not necessarily about the location nowadays. Like I said, many patients are traveling up to an hour for a great dentist. It's really who they're going to be meeting and the practitioner that's going to take care of them. And so I definitely want to just keep that in mind as you guys are like looking at, all right, how do I do my ads, right? Well, how far should I put them out? Which again is a whole another conversation we could have. But, and then I do see in some markets, direct mail is really working well nowadays. There are a lot of pieces going out and, I don't typically tell, to people you should run a special, but if that's something you are willing to do and you've never done it before, it's a great opportunity to see how well that, does in that direct mail campaign. And then one of the things I love to tell people about, and it's, it's not a hidden gem, it's just, do you have the time, is really amplifying what you're doing with your Google business profile. It is often something that is just set it and forget it. And in today's, like I said, Google economy, that's a whole different thing than our normal economy is. How are you playing with Google and what kind of money are you having to give to them? But like, if you are doing the right things on Google, if you're keeping your Google profile up to date, you've got, pictures, you've got constant reviews coming in, you're posting updates, you're making sure that your information is correct, Google will reward you, right? And that's the biggest thing is people will hear that, but it's something so simple. It takes 30 minutes, maybe a week, if that, just like make sure you're replying to reviews, putting up new pictures, convincing your patients to share their smiles in those pictures, that sort of thing. Doing that is like a subtle level of brand awareness that just plants that seed super early for people to make that decision. And then, we talked a little bit about if you want to stay steady, right? So this is, hey, we're cruising, we're doing good. We actually don't have capacity to take on a whole bunch of new patients right now. Here and there, it's great, right? And I think you probably worked with plenty of practices like this where they're like, we can't keep up, but we want to keep this, what we have going, is making sure that your team is fantastic on the phones and great in conversation when we're talking about treatment, making sure that they understand how to have those conversations about getting patients back in. Working on things like email campaigns for unscheduled treatment. Everyone hears it. We all try to do it. Most of the time what I find with my dentist is I'm getting an email between October and December when they're like, hey, your insurance is about to be up. But if I had heard from them maybe a little earlier in the year or on a more consistent basis, they'd be top of mind when I have things going on or things like that. The other things is if you are and have the ability to offer a membership plan, now is the time to do it. It's more affordable than ever for patients, especially those who look at the cost of what it would be to have it with their work or they don't have it, for instance, a couple $100s per patient for a family, really gets them in to get the care that they need. But then it also ensures that they're coming to see you. They're not going anywhere else because their membership plan is with you. And so keeping that in mind, if you're not already doing that, now is the time to consider. And there are so many opportunities and softwares and services that can make this a breeze for you. Some that are free to start, some that are, per head, a couple bucks a month. But in the end, they're managing it all for you. Patients are having a great experience. They're also able to help you keep up with reminders. There's a particular one, I won't mention it here just so that we're not sponsored by them, but I have a plan with them and I hadn't been in and my plan sent me a message, not my dentist. And they were like, hey, it's been a couple months. I think it's a really great thing for people to really consider if they're not already adding that into the services they offer to make care more affordable and easily accessible. And then, like I said, when it comes to just those touch points, are you sending out? I know it sounds so tacky and so cheesy nowadays, right? Like send a monthly newsletter, but 1,000%, if you're in their inbox, whether they're opening it or not, now other marketers might be like, no, you got to open it. What's the click through rate? That's great. But if you're just consistently emailing them enough that it's once a month, you're still going to be more top of mind than you are in those 4 to 6, months between their appointments when they're not coming to see you. I'm interested, Denae, to hear from your perspective, operationally, consulting wise, like what are you seeing in that realm of those like steady growers, especially like with reactivation? That's a really big deal right now, trying to get people back onto the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things. I am a big advocate of those monthly newsletters. And even if it's not monthly, maybe it's quarterly. But I
Yeah.
highly recommend that you send those out because it's a great time for you to make your patients feel like they're a part of your community. Or not even
Yeah.
make them feel like, but to allow them to be a part of your community. It's a
Right.
great way for you to communicate to your patients and to your community what is going on in your practice. Can they expect to see new faces?
Yeah.
Are you bringing in new technology? Are you getting involved in different community events? There's so many different things that you can throw on that newsletter. They're things that you're already doing, but it's a way for you to almost give a monthly or a quarterly Christmas card to your
Yeah. 1,000%.
yeah. And when you get into the habit of that, your patients actually look forward to it. A really good example, our insurance, our financial advisor, he does it. He sends it to us every single quarter. Guys, I don't know this guy. Never personally met him, but I know him. I know his family. I know that they have 2 kids. I know that they have a dog. I know what they did for Christmas vacation. Like this will go a really long way if you want your patients to feel like they're a part of your community.
Yeah.
Yes, it will make them think of you whenever their tooth is bothering them or when they say, "You know what? It's been a long time since I've been to the dentist." You will be the first person that they talk to. So those little touch points will go a really long way, but just like anything else in life, you have to stay consistent with it. You can't do it 1 month, forget about it the next month, and then try to catch up and do, 2 more in 2 weeks. You have to stay consistent with it. Reactivation, knowing having a system in place to where you're
Hmm.
actively working your unscheduled recare is going to be the best way to do it. Carve out 10 minutes a day. Work that report. Don't wait until your schedules are dead or empty to then work your recare report. Get into
Yeah.
working it every single day consistently because when you don't, what I see from an operational stance is the roller coaster effect. It's we're really busy and now we're not working our report. Now all of a sudden it drops down. Now we're not busy. Now we need to work our report. Then we work our report and we get busy. And then it just keeps going up and down
Yeah.
until you close. Like it's exhausting. Um, so yes, I think working your recare, get into to a habit of doing it consistently every single day. That's huge.
Hmm.
I love, Alyssa, what you said about the emails. People for years said, oh, emails are so outdated. Nobody
Hmm.
checks their email. They do. Everybody checks their emails. They really do. Just like you said, even if they're not opening it, they're still seeing that you
Yep.
emailed them and they're,
That's exactly right.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, right? As someone who has, I'm not going to tell you how many email addresses, but there's a lot, right? You got to have different ones for different things. Especially those inbox zeroers like myself, we see them. And that's where it's super key, especially in today's market, like, and making sure that that first line that they see, you'll hear me say hooked a whole lot. You got to make sure you have a good hook, right? And I'm like you, right? I also have an insurance broker. She sends me every quarter, right? And that's the same thing, that type of relationship, right? I feel like I know her and I could just pick up the phone and call her if I needed her. And I have heard from patients, in places where they are consistent, that it is very much that way. And these are the same patients who are bringing, platters of grapes from their garden to offices and delivering, goodies at Christmas and things like that, because they are, whether you know it or not, they are thinking about the team that you have and the care that you're providing, because it is something so personal and invasive. And, it's the first thing we all see when we look at each other is eyes and smile. Right. And so who better to have than somebody that you feel like you truly know and has your best interests at heart?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it keeps the door open. So even for those patients that say, you know what, I'm not interested in coming back,
Right.
unless they told you that they moved to another state, still keep them on your email list.
Yeah.
Keeping a door open and they might have moved to another practice that's right down the street from you, But if you keep that door open, what you're doing
Yeah.
is you're letting them know, hey, if you're not happy there, you're more than welcome to come back. We would
Yeah.
love to have you come back. And so
Right.
keep your door open, keep them on your email list, keep them
Hmm.
on your reports. Don't harass them with phone calls. They told you that they're not coming back. You don't need to call them, but
Yeah.
definitely keep them in the email threads and let them know, hey, our door's open and we're still thinking about you. If they don't want to hear from you, they're going to hit unsubscribe. Bottom line.
Correct.
So
Correct. One of the greatest things they ever added was that easy, quick unsubscribe, which, in the last year or two, the government has regulated how quickly people can unsubscribe. And for someone like me who has a lot of emails, it's definitely been, that great like catch all, like, ooh, unsubscribe. Right. And that's as simple as it is. They will unsubscribe. They'll mark it as spam, and that's fine. Those people will self-select themselves out of your practice.
yeah, absolutely. So continuing the growth mode versus the steady state or kind of maintaining your current
Yeah.
patient base topic. Budget wise, just from an operational stance, what I typically recommend when it comes to marketing is that you spend anywhere from 3 to 6% of your budget. So everything that you're collecting, 3 to 6% of it will stay for marketing if you're in growth mode. So that means 3 to 6% of everything that you're getting collected, the majority of that, like Alyssa said, stays in your top funnel of letting patients know about you. And then you kind of divide it up from there. If you're in steady state or you're trying to maintain, you still, like, spoiler alert, you still want to spend money on marketing. Just
Oh, a
because
thousand
you
percent.
hit
Yeah.
that active patient base does not mean that patients are still going to be leaving. Patients are still going to be leaving. Life happens. They're going to
Right.
move to different states. They're going to get married and decide to go to their spouse's dental practice. Like, things
Such a great
happen.
point.
And so keep your marketing budget. It does not have to be 3 to 6%. Typically, what I recommend is anywhere from 1 to 2% if you're in a steady state or like a maintain mode for your patient base. Also, Alyssa, I wanted to touch on with recession proofing and knowing, do I want to continue to expand my practice? Do I want to bring on an associate? Is now
Ooh.
the right time? This is something that real life practice owners are thinking about right now. What are your thoughts on, okay, we know that we've got to think this recession in the back of our mind. What are your thoughts on doctors that are kind of on the line? They're dancing around the line of bringing on an
Yeah.
associate.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. In looking at growth mode versus, steady state, growth mode is all about filling that funnel and just, amplifying what you're doing. And then that steady state is really about, tightening that bottom of the funnel. But in any of that portion, right, you could add an associate, right? And the thing about it is that if you don't have the demand, that's definitely where you're going to be in growth mode, right? To build up that clientele, to make sure that not only can you, have the number of patients you need to see, but to grow in your associate, making sure they have a full schedule, because there's nothing worse than having someone come on and they're, just fiddling their thumbs, and then they're like, what's that? And I know, as many associates that I'm friends with are like, well, it was great to start, and then it kind of petered out, right? And so I think the biggest thing is, how do you market that you're going to be bringing on an associate, especially in those practices who have one singular doctor and they're at that point of like, I want to grow, but I don't want to grow by myself. I don't want to be seeing all these new patients for myself. Do want to have some level of management, in this and growing. So it's making sure that when you're ready to do that, is making sure that you market them appropriately, actively, and over the top, right? That's the thing too. I see is a lot of people bring on an associate and it's like, mum's the word. And then, I see, Dr. Black. And the next time I come, I'm seeing Dr. Keefer. And it's like, well, who's Dr. Keefer? Where does she come from? Didn't even know you had an associate. I think that level of surprise is always unwelcomed to any patient coming into a practice. So making sure that you are letting people know early, that you're making sure that you have a schedule that will fit that, associate and what they are good at and skilled at and ready, to just get boots on the ground and jump into. But the other thing that I find is ensuring that your team is ready to answer the questions that are going to come up, right? And so, being able to answer about your new associate, where are they from? What kind of dentistry do they do? The care that they provide, what happens with their treatment plans, can they see this new doctor? What does their schedule look like? Having an easy FAQ one pager, and again, in today's world, you can whip these up so fast with Gemini, Chat GPT, et cetera. They'll walk you through the questions that are going to, happen from patients, whether it's on the phone or in person. And you want to make sure that you're enabling your team to feel confident in those answers so that they're not, they've already worked so hard and so much time and money to build. And so really enabling your teams is like updating your phone, making sure your website is updated before they, and then adjusting your review strategy. How are you asking for those reviews to hopefully include the name of your associate? Because that will then build that reputation and trust on your Google business page. People will see that there are multiple doctors so that again, they're not surprised when it's, Dr. Black Dentistry and they come in and Dr. Keefer's there as well. And they're like, who are you? So if they start to see that more often and as they're going through those touch points of all of your omni-channel or multi-channel marketing, I think that's probably the most important things that you can do when you're, bringing on an associate, whether it's in growth mode or in steady state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're bringing in a new provider. You're bringing in somebody that is going to be taking care of your patients, and you have to carve the time out for your team to get to know them so that they can transfer the trust, right? Your team already has the trust of every single one of your patients, and your patients are going to be relying on your team and on you to help them feel comfortable and to help them trust this new provider, that they are in good hands with this person. The quickest way for you to do that is to transfer the trust, is to help them see, I love this doctor and I know you're going to love them too.
Right.
This doctor is an amazing doctor at cosmetic work and you are in really good hands. Transfer that trust over to the patient so that they can feel like, okay, I trust you, Alyssa, which means I can trust him because you trust him.
Yeah,
And
great
so
point.
carve out the time when you're bringing in an associate for your team to get to know them so that they can build trust with them, so that they then can help your patients get trust. Another really good piece that you mentioned was knowing what marketing is going out there for your team so that they know how to respond to it. And
Yeah.
Alyssa, I see this all the time where
Mm-hmm.
teams or owners, they roll out all of this marketing stuff and their team has no idea what's going out there. I actually just talked to a client yesterday who said, Denae, I just got the new mailer in my mailbox and I had no idea that we were offering a new patient special.
Again, this could be a whole hour, 3 hour conversation on,
Yes.
and I see this, you're right. It's so often that disconnect between, let's just call it enablement, right? Because that's really what, the teams on the level, practice that we're doing and marketing. And often, practice owners and practice leaders, they're doing what they think is best, right? And they're like just trying to get out, crank it out, crank it out. But that disconnect from, and I have seen it so many times, especially it's so funny you say that mailers is the biggest one I see it on, or social ads. Well, let's say I got this screenshot and I had no idea that we were doing free consults for the month that it's for. I didn't realize, that we were, we had a best price guarantee. And you're like, and so, back to your conversation about that trust, think of when that, that office manager is answering the phone and the patient's like, well, I'd like the $99 new patient special. And she's like, immediately the patient's like, wait, did I call the right place? And then that barrier immediately goes into place of like, oh, well, they're going to tell me no. So I can't get it. I guess I'll call somewhere else. It's wild. What in your experience, have you seen work really well communication wise? Is it a newsletter internally? Like what things are you seeing that have worked really well for that, especially, communicating what is going out in marketing? And then I'll kind of share what I've seen and what has and hasn't worked too. I'd love to know from your perspective.
Yeah. So I am also a really big fan of the newsletters that you send out to your team. But for me, when it comes to updating your team on office updates or things that are going on, carve out 1 to 2 minutes in your morning huddle and just
Love that.
carve it out for office updates. Hey guys, we just approved the final, draft for the mailers that are going to be dropping here. Here's a copy of the final proof. Get familiar with it. Let me know if you have any questions. Carve out 1 to 2 minutes. When you have it on your morning agenda, it forces you to think, ooh, what's going on? What do I need to tell my team? What is it that I need to make sure that they're aware of? So for me, I love the office like newsletters, just like you do for patients. But when it comes to communicating things like this with your team, just add it to your morning huddle, 1 to 2 minutes, make it really quick. You can even have a, bill or a, what is it called? Cork board.
Yeah, like a pegboard or whatever. Yeah.
You can even have that and just kind of put those drafts up there, but don't rely on that board being up there and your team to see it. Make sure that you're letting them know, hey, I put this up here. This is what it is. Take some time to take a look at it.
Yeah, I love that. And I was going to touch on that. One of the most simple things you can do is if it's on a consistent basis, you're talking about it in your huddles, it will come as a second nature for your team to say, hey, what are we doing in marketing this week, right? I haven't heard you say anything about it, right? And so the more consistent you are with it, but I am a huge proponent, whether again, you're a single practice, emerging DSO, your group, whatever. I think it's always so important on a monthly basis to even just have some simple one pager. And, we used to call them a marketing minute back in the day. Sometimes it's a marketing newsletter, but like, here are the things we're doing. Here's the focus we want to talk about. Here's the results we're getting. I think that's really important too, is that you're touching on how are those things performing, so that maybe when you're having those deeper conversations or those monthly team meetings, you can also say, hey, guess what? Direct mails brought us a ton of new patients. When we're getting those calls, let's make sure that we are doing our tip top job, better than ever on the phones to making sure we're converting those, because we're spending X amount of dollars to get just one patient in, right? I think that's a really important thing to talk about, especially if people are starting to, become more data driven.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So we talked a lot today about recession proofing your practice, knowing not only just cutting waste, but knowing what waste really is, and knowing when to pivot, what marketing's working, what
Yeah.
marketing's not working. We talked a lot about how you can still manage through growth mode versus maintaining your steady state, even though we're still starting to think about recession. So we've talked about a lot of different things. We've also talked about bringing on an associate and things that you can do to make sure to set them up for success. Number one thing that Alyssa shared today was let your patients, let your team know that your associate is coming on before they come on. Get them involved, let them know, hey, there's going to be this new face. We're super excited. Also, keep in mind that the more excited you are, the more excited the patients will be to have them come on. And
Yeah,
so
nice.
get your team excited about it so that they can get your patients excited about it. If you tell me, hey, we have a new associate coming in, I'm going to be like, cool. And that's what you're going to feel too. So get excited about it so that they can get excited about it as well. All in all, guys, we talked about a lot of stuff. I am so, so happy that Alyssa joined us on the call
Thanks so much
today.
for having me.
Alyssa really is a marketing guru. She's got
Thanks
one of
so
the
much.
most diverse backgrounds I've ever known, from starting as a sterile tech to taking time out and joining the military or doing contract work for the military, where she was deployed across, the seas, and then coming back into the dental world. Alyssa has truly sat in almost every single seat, with the exception of being a dentist or being a hygienist, in not
Yeah.
only a practice, but also in a group practice. So I think we're all really lucky that Alyssa joined us today. And so,
Thank you so
Alyssa,
much.
thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have one, takeaway. I think that, as we, kind of dabbled into this recession conversation, is this is not the time to bury your head in the sand. This is definitely the time to not hit the panic button either, right? And so just be smart, cut what's not working, invest in what's proven, and then the biggest thing is keep showing up. Patients are still out there. They're still looking for great care. They want to know that they can build trust with the provider, and that will work with a winning business who decides, to invest in things like making sure you're ready for if there will be a recession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. All right, guys. Well, this is Denae Black, just reminding you to dream big, to plan smart, and then to make it happen.